Activator, command, focus, significance, self-assurance. My name is Nikki Gregory. I am the Chief Meaningful Work Officer at PeopleForward Network. And my biggest aha moment around learning my strengths came to me today during this episode, realizing all the times I felt stuck was when I was not using my strengths.
I'm Darren Verisami.
I'm Brandon Miller.
And this is The Strengths Whisperer,
the show empowering leaders to create, build, and sustain great places to work.
On this episode, we have Nikki Gregory, the Chief Meaningful Work Officer of PeopleForward Network. Nikki, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here with you two today.
We're super excited to have you, Nikki. Now, before we get into how you've built a company, in your case, a community that will outlast you, let's talk about you. In preparation for this conversation, we had you take the Gallup StrengthsFinder assessment. Brandon, you mind sharing with the audience why we've had Nikki take this assessment and why we're going to have our guests actually take this assessment?
Our title, The Strengths Whisperer, our goal is to have opportunity to talk to our guests, such as Nikki here today, about their greatest strengths as identified by Clifton Strengths, also known as the StrengthsFinder. And we're going to learn what it is that makes them unique, where they draw their greatest source of power and sustainability. And we get to share with them how those strengths contribute to their success up to this point, and how those strengths may contribute to continued success and maybe even bring some insights about themselves that they hadn't considered in certain ways.
Absolutely. Well, enough from Brandon and myself. Nikki, you just took this assessment. Can you share with us what your top 5 of those 34 Clifton strengths are?
Yes, and I am definitely still learning these. Years ago, I got the book, the StrengthsFinder 2.0 book, and I remember getting the code and taking these, and I remember being intrigued, but I never had anyone to help me break them down, and I couldn't remember them. Just took this refresher, and now I'm all jacked. I'm these guys on the other end of this microphone know more about me than I know about myself with the strengths, but so excited to dive in. Here's my 5. Activator, command, focus, significance, self-assurance.
Nikki, when you first took the assessment and you took a look at these, was there anything that resonated with you? Either, wow, that totally defines who I am, or what the heck is this and how did this end up here?
So I have taken many assessments in my life, and there are few that when you read it, you're like, whoa, this thing just pinned me, starting with when I was reading the definition of the first one, activator. So really, I can make things happen by turning thoughts into actions. And that's the definition here that I'm reading as I'm learning these. And I will give you an example. Ever since I was in school, the way that I took action on something was to sign myself up to teach it or to show someone else. And people would be like, oh, I didn't know that you knew that. And I was like, I don't. I just knew that I would hold myself to making sure that I didn't look like an idiot when I was sharing or teaching someone else. I would make sure that I learned it by that time when it would give me that laser focus and a deadline. And so I've done that since I was in high school. I still do that today. Sometimes it's a downfall. The opposite of this can be very challenging for my team sometimes, but I was like that. So pin me, sign up for something, learn it by that deadline. Had no clue what I was 2 weeks ago.
On that note, because you talked about how it's just been with you even since your high school days, in our first episode, we actually talked a little bit about the notion of sometimes these strengths, these talents, they're so natural in us that they're a result of our nature. And no matter what we do, we look in the rearview mirror and they're just there. Sometimes they come from a lens of nurture, and sometimes it's a combination of both. Activator definitely seems like it's been there for the long haul. Can you actually explain a little bit more, Nikki, about how this strength has mattered for your growth of your company and with your culture within your organization? How has it contributed?
So for the longest time, as my career has developed, I was working alongside entrepreneurs as the majority of who I served, and they have huge ideas. And the challenge with them was, as I would talk with them, I've been thinking about this for 5 years. And that almost like pierces my heart when I hear that. I'm like, you've been thinking on this for 5 years? Well, let's sit down and let's put together a plan to do something with this. And I never realized how much of an impact I was making with them until later when it was like, I'm putting the dots together. They said they've been thinking about this for 5 years and they've talked about it with a lot of people. And we had a meeting and then we broke down the 3 things to do. And I love holding people accountable. I am pretty good at that as well. And I circle back and I'm like, okay, so how are we doing on this? And we're getting movement like in a couple weeks on something that they have thought about for a very long time. So that would be one. The other is like on our team, I've learned to say, hey guys, whenever you're working with a client and you're stuck, bring me in. Let me help with that. Not from a like, I'm going to come in and save the day, but let me come in and use my strengths to help move that thing that's stuck forward.
Absolutely. You know, it's so fascinating. In the recording, we have sirens that were coming out in the background that passed, and activators can very much be called in when things have gotten to this emergency point of like, we're stuck, we can't do anything, and now it's an emergency, and we need somebody that can come in here, get things going and get things started because the sirens are going. That's exactly what activators can bring. Listeners, you've got 3 activators right now on this show. All 3 of us share that in our top 5. Brandon, you mind turning the lights on for everybody else and telling us a little bit about what is so spectacular about Nikki's top 5 and beyond that, if you feel like it?
So first of all, I'll start with this reality for Nikki. Had an opportunity to get to know her over the last about half year, I'd say. And anyone who lives in Nikki's region, I've tested this. I will ask them, hey, I'm working with someone named Nikki Llewellyn. Do you know Nikki? And without fail, and I mean 100% of the people I've asked is say, oh, I know Nikki Llewellyn. Of course we know Nikki. And I think, Nikki, as you and I have talked about your networking capabilities, your ability just to build around you a network of people who trust you, you trust them, different level of transaction, obviously based upon where business is at. And it seems to be a strength of yours. Would you say that's true?
Yes. Connecting people or advancing relationships, keeping relationships, I guess. Yes.
Yeah, and so the Clifton strengths, so there's 34 of these strengths, and they are neatly folded into 4 domains. And these domains inform how we lead, inform how we prefer to receive information. They inform just some of the broader characteristics that the individual strengths, when combined, share. One of those domains is the influencing domain. And this domain, and for those of you who are familiar with Clifton Strengths, you'll know it by the color orange. So it's the hot one, the fire one. It's very rare. So about 15% of a team's strengths will show up in this domain. And we'd like to say it's a lot if you have one of these in your top 5, meaning these are unmistakable strengths. They're very forward facing. They create a sense of awareness. And one in the top 5 is a lot. Nikki, do you remember how many you have in your top 5 that are of the orange color?
Only because you gave me this cheat sheet that's so beautiful here. And I see the bright orange and it looks like 4.
4 of the top 5. So this is a really unique profile when we see that level of concentration of influencing strengths. And interestingly enough, when we see them, we see someone who is very good at building alliances, forming networks, creating around you synergy, and absolutely being a point person, a go-to. The wheel of movement can center around these folks because you can work within that space and build a lot of coalitions around you. Would that be somewhat accurate of who you are?
Yes.
So then on top of that, so 4 of your 5 are all in one domain and the most unique. Now, there are 34 strengths, and we actually know the order of frequency of these strengths. So we know which ones appear the most often. There's the 5 that we will see worldwide in a lot of profiles. Very, very common. You don't have any of those. So you don't have any of those in your top 5. And then there are the strengths that are in the most rare 5, the big rare strengths. You have 3 of those in your top 5. In fact, you have the most rare strengths in your top 5. And they are in order of uniqueness: self-assurance, is the 34th. That's your number 5. Command is 33. That's your number 2. And significance is 32. That is your number 4. So of the uniqueness of your profile, you have 3 that are exceptionally rare. So this is 28 million respondents to Clifton Strengths in 60 countries, 30 languages. These are the 3 that are the most unique. So without giving you a label, Nikki, all I can tell you today is for those of us who study and work in this space, we all look at that profile and go, wow, that is a lot of awesome power, strength. Each one has a very unique ability. And what I could say about self-assurance, command, and significance is these are people-moving strengths. These are strengths that have a depth of confidence, self-assurance, a clear call to action. So take what you said about activator, command. It can move through emotion, create clarity, define emotion, help to direct where best to situate things. And then you have the impact strength, significance. If anything is worth doing, Nikki, I imagine you're thinking excellent and no less. We aim to be the best. If we're not there, it's not worth doing. And I don't know that anyone could ever talk you out of that. Could ever talk you out of, it's just good enough. Because I think you probably have such a high standard for you and those who work with you, and certainly those you serve, that those 3 may really support and help define some of your leadership success and capabilities. What do you think about those?
The word excellence has been in my own personal core value for as long as I hired my first coach when I was like 24. And that was one of our first activities that we did was we wrote my personal mission statement and my core values, and excellence has never left those core values. And it is one of our core values at PeopleForward Network, my company now. So yes. So when there are things that don't go as planned and with the intentionality and the meaning that was put into it, it really hurts my heartstrings, if you will, because that is what I strive for, is really meaningful impact and doing things with excellence.
And you see that everywhere in this profile. Now, I have to add that you have a strength at number 3 sandwiched in the middle of these influencing strengths. And this is the strength of focus. So focus also in and of itself is a very rare strength, especially in the United States. Very rare to see this strength. And Darren, you know a little bit about focus, right? This might be one you can comment on.
Yeah, I do know a little bit about focus. It's got the ability. So when I first took the assessment in 2012, that was my number 6 strength. And it was very much, I had the ability to close the windows of distraction out to create a path towards getting things done. I'd be able to see distractions and keep us on the path to move and advance an idea forward to make sure that we got it across the finish line. And it brings with it a level of energy and at times intensity. And these other strengths as well that Nikki has, they bring with them a level of intensity that can come with them, that can be felt with them. But as Brandon mentioned, they're people moving strengths. One of the pieces that I did want to make sure that all of our listeners are aware of when we're looking at these rare strengths, why it's so important to understand how rare a strength is, like command. Focus is actually a very rare strength as well to have in your top 5, but significant self-assurance. When we think about that, what does it mean? It means that in the general population, people have had far less practice in working with and interacting with those strengths, and they stand out a little more because there's so much more that they have to give because they're so rare. They can also more easily be misinterpreted because what comes naturally to somebody who has rare strengths might not be received the same way because those are more frequently down in that 30 through 34 position. And that's stuff that we get into unpacking in future conversations with folks. But that's an important takeaway for people to be aware of. And that is why it's so majestic to see these strengths, so many of them in the top 5. It's part of what is truly our genius and part of what attracts people to us and allows us to really stand out in who we are and what we're doing. It can also be elements of what causes people to misunderstand us, at least in first iterations and different things. And we have to work through some of those elements as well. I want to change gears just a little bit. And Nikki, I want to ask you, how are you creating a culture and a community that you feel like is going to live beyond you? And how do your strengths play into that?
Well, interestingly enough, a few times that you were talking about my top five and some uniqueness, that the way you described it is you said something like moves people forward, influences people forward, or whatever. And it's just interesting that my company now, where I spend my entire little bit of background on me, I've always had lots of things going on, lots of different initiatives, own this company, got this side hustle, always had lots of things. And I got to a place with the vision for PeopleForward Network that I believe so strongly that it was the culmination of everything that I ever wanted to do, like all of it in one place. And I said, okay, in January of this past year, I am going all in. Like, this is everything that I stand for, and there is no more distractions. I am going to go all in. This is the first time in my life that I've ever done that. And I just turned 40. So I have always had lots of different things. But as I'm listening to you, I'm like, okay, that is what this company does, is we move people forward, equipping leaders that have a prerequisite. The prerequisite is that they subscribe to personally, like they opt in themselves to a people first way of leading. And we are there once they have that threshold. Like, the difference is I'm not trying to go convince anyone. Now, if I have that opportunity, great. I want to help people I proclaim that I am a people first leader, and I want to be the best. I want to stay up to date. I want to meet the very best people. And we are here to have a community for them to get the education and the inspiration and the fire and the connections that they need to be the best leader ever. That's how we met 34 Strong, because we found, like, you guys are one of the very best at what you do. And that's how we connected. And so I think from a legacy perspective, I have built and led communities for a long time with the many things in my past. So community has always been there, gathering people, helping people build relationships, and helping people learn from each other, right? Like, that's always been there. Now it is in this niche space where there's such meaning behind the people that we serve, have such a heart and such a passion for this. And they're building lifelong relationships. Like, we have a platform that's not like, there's other organizations that are communities out there, and you're like, oh, I think I was in that one day. Maybe like a decade ago, it was part of that. We're building something that is going to be one of the greatest places that people have stepped into. I will never forget that I was part of PeopleForward Network. I have met my people. Like, I have met some of my best friends. Like, this thing changed my business. It was one of the best investments that I ever made to help me move my business forward and move my people forward, and taking everything that we've ever learned to be able to create that experience that is the best community that these leaders could join. At the same time, the legacy of applying everything that we learned and being held to such a high standard, when you're like, we are bringing the best thought leaders together that know all of the what to do, and we're that community. Us as a team, I am leading a team that we have to show up and practice that. We have a higher pressure to say, hey, like the other day, I read an article about a lady that was talking about the challenge of her company offering after hours gatherings, and how it takes away from her ability to be the mom that she wants to be. And it causes challenges in our marriage. And it made me think, like, sometimes we are having 5:30 like PM cocktail hours and stuff. Our next meeting was to talk about this. And all of us talked about how that can take away from a person to really be able to be their best self. And so we made a decision, and we've taken away events that are outside of the work hours. And it's like, guys, if we can be excellent in creating amazing event experiences, people will come during work hours. No one's going to tell them they can't come. We have to be able to justify that time. We have to have such great experiences that they can fit in there. And so just really holding ourselves accountable to serving the people we serve, but also practicing that inside and being the best place that my people have ever worked. That's what we're here to do.
I want to point out, as we're listening to Nikki and coming back to those influencing strengths, and Nikki, thank you. Thank you for sharing with such passion and raw emotion around what lives in you. Because when you hear those influencing strengths come together, they define mission-driven leaders. So influencers typically must have a purpose, a cause to support, and that's when they really lock in. And when I hear your focus coming through, I'm centering it down. I know where it's at. I turned 40. It all came together. Now I'm aiming it there. Such a powerful example for our listeners just to hear those strengths coming together and now leading you toward the excellence in your journey.
Thanks for sharing that, Brendan. That's really important for us to see how strengths are on display. They fire off of us whether we try or not. And that was just a great example of hearing that come to life as Nikki was communicating. Nikki, you just did an incredible job of sharing what it meant for you to be a people first leader and really identifying what that meant in your life. Do you have any insights for others that are looking to lead more effectively? Maybe they're just getting started in their leadership journey. Maybe they're a CEO of a company. Maybe they're leading a team. But can you share from your lens with that same passion what others can do to be people first leaders? Because clearly we need more of those in our world.
A couple things come to mind. So the first is you can never stamp a blueprint of your next door neighbor or that leader in your community that has won an award, that you look up to their company and stamp that blueprint and go take that and do that and be that people first leader that they are. It's not something that you can replicate. It is something that you have to dig deep inside within to really understand what is the core of why I want to do this. And what is the vision that I want to create? Like the experience I want to create for the people. And what is it that is inside me that matters so much? Like I want to show up with love. I want to help people leverage their strengths to be their best. I want to unlock the opportunity for advancement, whether people stay here and advance or my company is just a platform that helps them advance, whatever that is, right? You have to figure out what that is for you and really have a clear vision for you before you can do anything. What I see people do is like, they read an amazing Patrick Lencioni book, which I love too, or they heard what their neighbor did, and then they go try to apply that, and it doesn't stick because it's not in the core DNA of them. So we have to do that deep dive. Once you understand what it is that you want to create, the experience you want to create for your employees and what you want to do for them, now seek out who has done that from different angles. There's not going to be an all-inclusive someone that's done everything you want to do, but this person that has used their workplace to advance people's lives and help them, whether it's to advance inside or get to the next level. You see somebody that's done that well, and you're going to reach out to them and start to create mentors around you, peer mentors. Maybe you can do things for them, but you have a core group of people in your life that you reach out to ask for help, to ask for insight. Hey, can I send you a quick text? And I'm going to have a quick call this morning just to ask you and bounce things. You have to have this core group of community that help you advance. And then the third thing is, outside of your mentoring community of people that are sharing ideas, is what is it that you're doing to really advance your knowledge? And whether that is books that you read and you're committed to not just stacking up on your nightstand, but truly reading, or podcasts that you regularly listen to that fill you. What is it that you're doing to fuel your learning journey to be able to be that? And you never arrive. You never arrive. You could win the award or whatever, but you never arrive, and it's a lifetime commitment to do that.
Nikki, I really appreciate your comment relative to people finding for themselves what's in here, what lives in my heart, and what can I learn from others, but what becomes authentic to me. And part of our excitement to meet with Nikki today was the uniqueness of her strengths profile. But something to share is that the odds of anyone having the same top 5 in order as Nikki is 1 in 33 million. And that goes for every one of us. We are incredibly unique. And the way we would approach having a sustained people-first model, our words, a strengths-based organization known as employers of choice, great places to work, is as unique as each leader and how they are going to move forward in that effort. And so that authenticity, that ability to, yes, collect ideas from great leaders, thought leaders such as Patrick Lencioni, hear from people in your network, and then you get to cobble together what works for you and then learn, how do I sustain this? How do I develop this? And then how, Nikki, thank you for saying this, how do I keep growing up into this myself? We have a phrase at 34 Strong. We like to say that we have to eat our own cooking. Meaning, if we're going to stand up and say we build great places to work, we really feel like we should be one. We should be one of those. And Nikki, I heard you say that exact thing, that how can we tell organizations to be a certain way and conduct themselves, and yet now we have to go back, look in the mirror, go to the lab, have the conversation, and adjust to become even a bit more closer to where we're trying to get as we build these strong communities. And so, Darren, what we've seen over and over again is that the growth in these organizations takes time. It's unique. Every situation is going to be as unique as that gathering of people, which is what's so fun about those individual puzzle pieces all coming together to create the masterpiece. And no one of us, even Nikki with her powerful, unique strengths, no one of us brings the whole piece. You need those other pieces. Literally on this report I'm looking at for Nikki, she has a number 1, and Nikki, you have a 34. Like, way down there, and that 34, you look down there and go, I might need some of that. Someone might need to bring some of that because apparently that doesn't fly in my radar, and I could use some help there to gather some of that and move that forward.
Those areas when we talk about the talents that we are not, right? Those areas of our profile where that is, it really brings us to the place of yes to well-rounded teams and no to well-rounded individuals. We're taught you just have to be a jack of all trades, and it really holds us back. It actually causes us to atrophy in our true areas of genius and the ways that we can actually take that idea, take that program, take what we are truly great at and advance that. I want to change gears just a little bit back to the employee experience. Nikki, when you think of the employee experience that you want your team to have, what's that experience like? What are they telling their loved ones that their experience has been like being a part of PeopleForward Network?
If I was to sum it up very quickly, I'd say that they feel meaning in the activities that they've done for work. Like that is the main mission. We experience meaningful work, and we have a saying, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And everyone operates under that. So that's my simple term. But in a bigger storytelling way, I want our work experience on our team to inspire things that then get conveyed at the dinner table. And kids are inspired by them, and spouses are inspired by them. I want our work experience to inspire an energizing opportunity or just more energy to go do things that, like, the opposite of, we've all been in work experiences where it drains us and we're like, oh, I said no to that church thing. I don't have energy to do that. Oh, I've been meaning to get in that club, but I haven't had the energy to do that. I want work to be able to fuel the energy that inspires them to be like, yeah, I got the energy for this. And ultimately just helps them to go home and be a greater leader inside of their home or their community, outside of just the peers that we work alongside.
Listeners, emotionally, that feels really incredible what Nikki just said. And we can all think of the times that we've been in roles where we felt that. We felt energy from work, and then we go home and we give that energy back to home. And then we bring that energy from home back to the workplace. Brandon, is there any data and information that's actually out to validate this actual emotional component?
We keep hearing this phenomenon called quiet quitting. Nikki, you're probably familiar with that phrase.
Yes.
And it's a retelling of something that we've been hearing about for years and years, employee engagement. And the reality that about half of the workforce, I'll just use the United States for some of our listeners here, in the United States, about half of our workforce is there. And that means they're showing up, hopefully, and when they do, they're just kind of coasting. They're not really going too much and not too little, just staying in a space of just existing. And yet, when engaged, and one of the key drivers of that is a strengths-based approach to development, we can see that engagement go up 6 times more than what we can see in others without that approach. And what's fascinating that Nikki just mentioned is that when a person enjoys engagement, so it doesn't mean that they're doing 120% every day of the week. They're not being taken advantage of. In fact, there's a loyalty, there's a love, there's a level of, I get to do this. I enjoy my work. I wake up excited to go be a part of this community that's growing that I hear you describing with People Forward Network and the workplace you're building. And at the same time, those people who are engaged, they enjoy excellent quality of life, 3 times more likely to say, it is well with me. I'm doing well. I'm okay. It's not perfect. Life doesn't have its ups and downs. We all live through a pandemic. Challenges are going to exist, but overall, they enjoy that benefit of seeing greater livelihood outside of work as well.
Nikki, thank you again for being on the show. And I know many of our listeners are going to want to follow up and learn more about you and People Forward Network. How can they go about connecting with you and learning more about you?
I love LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. So feel free to look me up on LinkedIn under Nikki Gregory. Still going by the name Llewellyn as well on there, but Nikki, Gregory. And then if you would like to look up People Forward Network, we have so many resources, even some from 34 Strong on our website that we love to share. And it's peopleforwardnetwork.com.
Nikki, you've had so many powerful insights to share with us over the course of today's show. I really want to thank you for joining us and sharing your story. Now, for our listeners out there, I want to ask, are you ready to discover your strengths to accelerate into life like Nikki has done with hers? We believe in this path so much that we're offering our listeners the opportunity to discover their top 5 Clifton strengths. All you have to do is email us at Brandon@34strong.com. That's Brandon, Brandon, at the number 34strong.com. And include in your subject line, top 5, to request your Strengths Finder code. And then we'll follow up with you from there and make that happen.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Strengths Whisperer. What did you take away from the conversation with Nikki? We'd love to know. Just email us at Brandon@34strong.com. Again, if you are ready to discover your top 5 strengths, include the word top and the number 5 in the subject line, and we'll get right back to you.